Saturday night.
Hello guys, this is the Gaming Revolution here and welcome back to an all new World War II Zombies video. Today we're going to be going over some storyline information for World War II Zombies that links into RIESE or the Giant, whatever you want to call it. Now I was originally going to make this video on April the 28th, I even tweeted about it, and for some weird reason I never got around to making the video, so I'm finally making the video today. Now a few days ago I did post a video in which I went over a ton of new World War II Zombies information. Within that video I went over some storyline information. I also went over some new information that our characters within World War II Zombies are going to be a cast of celebrity characters, and I also went over some new details regarding how it's going to be a horror mode, and also went over some possible details to where the location may be for World War II Zombies. I will leave a link to that video down in this video's description. I would highly recommend going ahead and checking it out. But before we get into the video, if you do go on to enjoy this video, by the end of it make sure to drop a like down below. Let's try and go for 1,115 likes on today's video, as well as subscribe to the channel so you never miss a future upload here on the channel. Don't forget to turn notifications on to ensure furthermore that you never miss an upload. But with that all out of the way, let's get straight on into the video. So real quick before I get into the storyline information, I just want to say that it has finally been confirmed that World War II Zombies is going to be first person and not third person. We know that World War II Zombies is going to be quite similar to Dead Space. It's going to be Dead Space themed, and Dead Space is a third person horror game. So people are thinking that maybe World War II Zombies could be third person like Dead Space, but all it's going to be taking from Dead Space is that horror, gory aspect. Third person will not be returning, it's still going to be first person, because Prestige is Key tweeted to Michael Condrey, the co-head over at Sledgehammer Games, saying, "I just wanted to know if you were able to crush the rumours of third person only being in World War II Zombies." He replied saying, "Crushed, the game is about gun and combat skill across all modes, though headquarters is also a social and peacocking space, so it is largely third person." So yes, it is going to be first person. I'm so happy about that. I think third person would have definitely deteriorated this mode and it wouldn't have felt like zombies. But with that all out of the way, I want to cover these small bits of storyline information that we have leads on. Okay, so as you guys know, there was a secret Easter egg website released for World War II Zombies absolutely ages ago. This was the first teaser for World War II Zombies, and in this we got various different images. Now as I said, make sure to go ahead and watch that last video linked in this video's description, where I break down absolutely everything and all of the storyline teasers and stuff like that we have gotten. But one of the storyline teasers that we received for World War II Zombies was a portrait of a young man, which is a real portrait, and this links directly into RIESE, funnily enough, which I'm going to be talking about within today's video. So Raphael's portrait of a young man first arrived in Poland thanks to the efforts of Princess Isabella Fleming, who started a collection of works of historical and cultural significance at her family residence in Puławay in Poland. Her aim was not only to acquire outstanding works of art, but above all to gather pieces that would preserve the memory of momentous events in the history of Poland. Driven by such an ambition, Princess Isabella eventually set out to establish a museum of art to be housed in the Temple of the Sibyl, a round colonnaded building built in Puławay as a replica of the ruins of the ancient Sibyl Temple in Tivoli, Italy. Completed in 1801, the structure bore on its frontal elevation a phrase that was meant to encapsulate the noble idea guiding the princess's endeavours, the past to the future. It was not long before Princess Isabella's collection was bolstered by numerous donations from members of other aristocratic families. The growth of the collection soon called for additional space, and a building dubbed the Gothic House was erected next to the Temple of Sibyl to hold foreign pieces, namely works of European art. All the while, Princess Isabella's efforts enjoyed the ongoing support of other members of her family. Her son, Prince Adam Jerzy, who in 1799 to 1801 served as Russian ambassador to King Charles Emmanuel V of Sardinia, took advantage of every opportunity to enhance the collection his mother had established. He made numerous purchases during his extensive travels throughout Europe, the most notable of which was Raphael's portrait of a young man and Leonardo da Vinci Medicis, Lady with an Ermine, from the Giustiniani family in Italy. I apologise if I'm mispronouncing a lot of these words here. The paintings were brought to pull away and put on display in the Gothic house, where, alongside Rembrandt's landscape with the Good Samaritan, they made up the jewel of the Czartoryski collection, coming to be known as the Great Three. More than just paintings, the collection also boosted a rich library of approximately 2,500 valuable manuscripts and an assortment of prints, maps and archival materials. In all, Isabella managed to acquire about 16,000 Polish works and over 22,000 foreign ones. The family's involvement in political affairs, Prince Adam Jerzy acted as the head of a provisional government during the November uprising and later served as the head of the national government, made the pull-away collection a target for looting by Tsarist forces, and the Russians plundered, among other things, a considerable portion of the library. It was a stroke of luck that the collection's most valuable pieces went undiscovered as they lay hidden in the basement of the Temple of Sibyl. From there, their caretaker, Franciszek Kozlowski, I'm mispronouncing these names, I just know it, transported the works under the cover of night to the Reformist monastery in nearby Kazimierz in May of 1832. Kozlowski was able to remove the remaining works from their hiding place with the help of Daniel Ruprecht, Joseph Schmidt, and the Canon Piętkowski, and he took them along with the works entrusted to the Kazimierz monastery to the Zamoyski estate in Clemenceau. Sometime after that, the collection was relocated to the Czartoryski Palace in Synawia. For several years, the valuable collection languished hidden away in the annex of the palace grounds, deprived of care and attention it deserved. Prince Adam Jerzy was forced to flee the country when a warrant for his detainment was issued by the Tsar. In 1843, he purchased the Hotel Lambert in Paris and made it his home. He had his collection transported to the new residence, but financial troubles urged him to sell off the portrait of a young man along with one of the collection's most outstanding pieces of jewellery. In 1850, the painting was sent to London, and from there it was taken to Berlin to be examined by appraisers. However, no buyer could be found for Raphael's painting, and it returned to Paris in 1852. Upon Prince Adam Jerzy's death in 1861, the family patriarch and heir to the collection became Władysław Czartoryski. Taking advantage of the favourable political climate in the Austrian portion of Poland, the prince decided to establish a museum in Krakow to house the family collection. In December of 1876, the prince's Synawia library was given a new home in a former armory building in Krakow. It was only in 1882 that the paintings by Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael and Rembrandt were finally relocated to Krakow, but once there they remained on public display for the next 30 years. The period of stability ended with the outbreak of World War I in 1914, upon which the collection's most valuable pieces were put on deposit in the Dresden Gemäldegalerie Gallery by Prince Władysław's daughter-in-law, Maria Ludwika Czartoryska. However, the post-war political situation and the fact that Poland was once again a sovereign state drove the director of the Dresden institution, Dr. Hans Post, to do everything in his power to keep the Czartoryski deposit from ever returning to its rightful home. The portrait of a young man did finally make its way back to Krakow, but no earlier than 1922. In 1939, seeing the outbreak of World War II as an imminent threat to the collection, the director of the Prince's Czartoryski Museum, retired General Marian Kukiel, devised a plan of action to safeguard the holdings. As part of the plan, he advised the collection's proprietor Augustin Joseph Czartoryski and his curator, again I do apologise for all these weird pronunciations, but I don't speak Polish obviously, Stefan Saturnin Komornicki, to evaluate the most prized works to Synawia. Select pieces from the museum were transported out of Krakow in late August of 1939. The Great Three, as well as a valuable collection of antique jewellery and some objects belonging to former Polish rulers, were all hidden away in an annex of the palace grounds, the same one that had served as a hiding place nearly a century earlier. German forces reached Synawia on the 15th of September, and on the 18th of September 1939, the estate's caretaker, Zophius Smith, reported that the hiding place had been plundered. The missing items included the collection of antique jewellery and a royal coffer containing dozens of items connected to the Polish ruling clans. In late September 1939, the German authorities permitted the transport of the remaining pieces stored in Synawia to the palace of Witold Czartoryski in Pelkini. Soon after, afterwards. However, in early October 1939, the artifacts were seized by the Gestapo and taken to Jaroslaw. Stationed there was the Special Commissioner in charge of safeguarding works of art in Eastern occupied lands, Dr. Kajetan Mulman, a protege of Field Marshal and later Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, who would take great measures to ensure the contents of the Czartoryski collection end up in his personal collection. For a short time, the collection kept in Jaroslaw was taken to be secured in a building of the Jagiellonian Library in Krakow. It is highly probable that the Great Three were already in Berlin by November 1939. Initially, they were kept in the office of Kajetan Mulman, as testified to after the war by one of his colleagues, the Dutch art historian Dr. Edward Pleetzuch. Oh my god, I'm sorry, these pronunciations are so bad. During one interrogation, Pleetzuch claimed that the building in which Mulman's office was located had buried down following an Allied air raid. The account could have been the source of the post-war theory that the portrait of a young man had been lost to fire. Those who accepted that conclusion obviously did not take the trouble to familiarize themselves with Pleetzuch's testimony, since he did eventually admit during a more thorough investigation that prior to the catastrophic destruction of the air raids, the priceless paintings had been moved to the Kaiser Friedrich Museum. He also revealed that they had ultimately been put in a safety deposit box at the Deutsche Bank branch at 27 Unter den Linden Street. Meanwhile, Dr. Hans Post, the aforementioned director of the Dresden Gemälde Gallery, had already reserved the Great Three for a soon-to-be established museum in Linz, the art museum whose planned holdings were envisioned to be so magnificent as to overshadow those of the world's most eminent institutions, was the brainchild of none other than Adolf Hitler himself, a failed artist who had been denied admission to the painting faculty of the Vienna Academy of the Fine Arts. To bring his dreams to fruition, the Chancellor of the Third Reich enlisted the services of architect Albert Speer and Hans Post, who had been granted the necessary authorization and funding to begin acquiring works from all fields of art. Every state institution and military outpost was informed that Hitler's representative on matters concerning the museum in Linz, Dr. Hans Post, was to be given precedence in the selection of artifacts seized by our occupying forces. Thanks to this, after only a single year, Post was able to acquire 475 works just for the painting gallery of the planned Linz Museum. Post died in 1942, but his successor, Dr. Hermann Voss, carried on the project with even greater zeal. By 1945, the team responsible for the Linz Museum had managed to amass a collection of about 8,000 paintings. In 1940, Leonardo da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine did return to Krakow, but the portrait of a young man and several other paintings remained in the vault of Berlin Bank. Raphael's painting and the other works of art were included in a special catalogue of artifacts seized by the Germans in the territory of the general government. The portrait of a young man appeared under position 141 on that list. In 1942, Lady with an Ermine was once again removed to Berlin, this time under the pretext of a need to safeguard it against the danger of possible Allied airstrikes in the territory of general government. In reality though, it was an attempt by Kajetan Mulman's mentor Hermann Göring to take possession of the painting for himself. The Reich Marshal was a great lover of art. The collection he was in the midst of assembling with the agency of numerous representatives in various lands was not far short of the collections held by some of the world's largest museums. In fact, to house all of his works, Göring had to readapt his Karenhall hunting lodge on the outskirts of Berlin. Even then, however, his appetite for collecting outgrew the space he had at his disposal to display all of the works. On the 5th of November 1940, Göring issued a special directive outlining the method according to which museum collections seized in occupied territories were to be divided. The new system was devised so as to ensure better access to the most valuable collections for Göring's representatives. The order of precedence was as follows: works of art reserved by the Führer for his personal use, works of art designated for the Reich Marshal's collections, works of art and books of possible use in the establishment of the Hochschule institution, or these found under the jurisdiction of Reichsleiter Rosenberg, Dr. Alfred Rosenberg, and then works of art designated for German museums to be inventoried by Rosenberg's staff and transported to to Germany. The above pecking order indicates that a race was on for the Czartoryski's collection between Hitler's and Göring's representatives. Despite the Marshal having a lesser rank and inferior influence, his rapacious for gaining control of the Great Three likely drove Hans Post, with Hitler's approval, to put the paintings in temporary deposit with the Governor General. That way the paintings would remain safely out of Hermann Göring's clutches. Alright, so this is the bit of the video where the storyline of the portrait of a young man links into Der RIESE, which is pretty interesting. So in 1942, Governor General Hans Frank appointed the Swiss architect Dr. Wilhelm Ernst von Palazux as his personal advisor on art. One of Palazuk's first assignments, though he had already worked on construction projects for general government authorities, was to prepare the interior design plans for the governor's residences in places like Krakow, Kresowice. As he said, I apologize for these weird pronunciations, and Krynica Zdroj. Palazux was also charged with organizing the transports from Berlin of all the paintings that would adorn the walls of these residences. Despite considerable interferences from Göring's men, Palazux managed to have the Great Three return to Krakow in mid-1943, yet Hans Frank would only be able to enjoy them for a mere few months. The middle of 1944 saw the onset of events that would seal the fate of the works of art looted by Nazis in occupied Poland, with the Red Army taking control of Lviv, which lay on the border of the general government territory. In July 1944, Hans Frank undertook to initiate the evacuation of the collections residing in Krakow. To that end, he sent Wilhelm von Palazux to Lower Silesia with the task of locating a suitable site in which to store the collections. Guess what? Where is Der RIESE set? It is set within Lower Silesia, and this is exactly what we see here. So this is very, very interesting. Now, the World at War Call of Duty Zombie storyline started because Group 935 essentially created an undead army for the Nazis, and this is similar. With World War II zombies, we know that the storyline is going to be about the Third Reich's desperate attempt to create an army in the final stages of the war, and we know that Der RIESE is based off of all the conspiracies regarding the Nazis' experiments within World War II, such as Die Glock and stuff like that. We may be seeing something similar with World War II zombies. Now, as I said, I don't know where this portrait of a young man ties into the storyline for World War II exactly, but it will be based off of this in some way, shape or form. So to continue with the task of locating a suitable site in which to store the collections, the intended repository for the evacuated works was to be the palace of Manfred von Richthofen in Sichau, Sochi, near Jawa. Now, could this have been where Treyarch thought of the name Richthofen from? I never even knew this, but I mean, maybe that's where they based the name Richthofen from. We literally have a guy called Richthofen, and earlier within all of this history, there was also a guy called Dr. Edward, so this is pretty peculiar. It was most likely in August 1944 that the portrait of a young man arrived in Sichau along with other works. This is supported by surviving notes made by Palazux and by his post-war testimony. Up to January 1945, the care of the artwork stored in Sichau, including the Great Three, was overseen by the Australian art conservator Dr. Edward Knassel. Now again, maybe they based Richthofen's name off of simply connecting these two names together to create Dr. Edward Richthofen, since Der RIESE is based in Lower Silesia and it's all based off of this storyline in some way. I don't know, but that could have been possible. Now, on the 17th of January 1945, Hans Frank left Krakow for Lower Silesia, and a provisional office of the general government authorities was set up in Sichau, but office space for the clerks became scarce, and it was decided to relocate the art collection to the palace of Hans Christoph and Herta von Wittersheim Ramster in Murra, near Strigo. The works of art arrived there on the 20th of January 1945. 2 days after that, Palazux left Lower Silesia for the town of Nahons in Bavaria, where his home and the Frank family residence were located. When the decision came to recall the general government authorities from Lower Silesia, Hans Frank entrusted the care of the collection deposited in Morawa to local authorities. The town's mayor, Robert Schonitzler, and the head of the local branch of the National Socialist People's Welfare Organization, Wilhelm Dressler, the transfer of care over the collection was made official with a formal document signed on the 23rd of January 1945. 2 days later, Hans Frank departed for Nahus, where a provisional officer of the general government was to be set up. But before Frank left Lower Silesia, he made arrangements with his aide de camp Helmut Pfaff Enroth to get 3 crates of select pieces of art of Morawa. On the 25th of January 1945, Frank's man took 20 paintings with him to Bavaria, among which were Lady of an Airman and Landscape with the Good Samaritan. As well as some liturgical items and other valuable pieces, the portrait of a young man was to remain in Morawa on account of the unwieldy size of the board. It was painted on a 59 x 75 centimeter. The other artifacts selected by Pfaff Enroth arrived in the house several days later, with the crates full of artworks initially being stored in the bakery of George Stickel and later taken to Hans Frank's office in the Bergfrieden Cafe in the house. Until May 1945, the works of art were looked after by Wilhelm von Paluziux and Ernst Kneissel. Among others, the invoice of artwork taken to Nahus by Pfaff Enroth in February 1945 includes no mention of the portrait of a young man. On the 25th of January 1945, the historical artifact conservator of the province in Lower Silesia, Prof. Gunther Grundmann, received an order from Berlin to evacuate the most precious works of art in his jurisdiction to the German interior. 4 days later, Grundmann arrived in the palace of Morawa, and with the help of soldiers stationed there, he secured 3 truckloads of artwork from the collection. On the 30th of January 1945, the contents of the trucks were taken to Skafgott's library in Seerpleis, where the conservator had his office. But according to Grundmann's journal, his post-war testimony and later recollections, the portrait of a young man was not among the paintings evacuated from Morawa in that shipment. Thus, we can be sure that Raphael's painting was also absent from the truck carrying the most valuable pieces out of the Seerpleis. Dispatched by the conservator in February 1945, the shipment destined for Coburg contained 65 paintings and several tapestries which had been the property of Polish museums. After American forces gained control over the city, Prof. Grundmann contacted the occupying authorities and handed over the holdings brought over from Seerpleis. The Polish artifacts were first placed in the Kallenberg Palace and later at the Tambach estate. The following year, in late April 1946, the stock that Prof. Grundmann had shipped out of Lower Silesia was returned to Krakow, along with other works of art secured from Hans Frank's arrest in Nahus, which took place on the 4th of November 1945. None of the documents produced at this time included the statements of American clerks and the reports of American troops of the teams responsible for securing works of art, the so-called monuments men, contained any mentions of the portrait of a young man ever reaching Coburg or Nahus. All signs indicated that it must have disappeared while still in Lower Silesia. So maybe within World War II zombies, we're going to be in a map that's similar to RIESE in terms of its theme, with the teleporters and the dialogue research and all of the crazy Nazi experiments, and maybe we're going to be trying to find this painting because it might have some sort of significance or something like that. Now, there is even more storyline of this painting, but basically it just doesn't get found, so there's not really any point of going any further into the storyline behind this painting, but I will leave a link to the source down in this video's description if you want to go ahead and read the rest for yourself. But anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for the latest and greatest Black Ops 3 zombies, World War II zombies, and Infinite Warfare zombies news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.